Stop scrolling for just a moment, because there could be a Jefferson nickel hiding in your home right now that you would never think twice about spending. These tiny 5-cent coins may look ordinary, but some of them carry details that collectors are desperately searching for: rare dates, unusual mint marks, strange surfaces, and hidden characteristics that can completely change the story of a coin. Today on Hidden Coin Millions, we're revealing 6 ultra-rare and potentially valuable Monticello 5-cent coins that deserve your attention. And trust me, you do not want to skip ahead, because every coin gets more exciting, and the final discoveries could make you look at your old nickels completely differently. So check your coin jar, check those forgotten collections, and do not spend that nickel yet. Keep watching, because one tiny detail could be the clue you've been waiting for. First up, coin number 1 is a 1948 Monticello 5-cent coin with no mint mark, showing gray dots on the surface, a black dot on the reverse side, and the circulated condition you described. At first glance, this may look like exactly the kind of old nickel that someone would overlook. It has age. It has circulation. It has surface changes. It does not immediately scream fortune. But this is precisely where the suspense begins. Because with older USS coins, the story is not always written in giant letters. Sometimes it is hidden inside the smallest details. The 1948 Monticello 5-cent belongs to the classic Jefferson nickel era, a series that carries one of the most recognizable designs in American coinage. The obverse features Thomas Jefferson, one of the most important figures in American history, while the reverse displays Monticello, Jefferson's historic Virginia estate. That building is not simply decoration. It became one of the defining visual symbols of the Jefferson nickel series, giving collectors an instantly recognizable connection between American history, architecture, and coinage. And when you hold a 1948 nickel in your hand, you are holding a piece of post-war American history. The United States was moving into a completely different era after World War II. The country was changing rapidly. Americans were returning to civilian life, industries were transforming, and everyday commerce was moving forward. Yet these little 5-cent pieces continued passing from hand to hand, store to store, pocket to pocket, carrying their history silently through the years. The composition of a regular 1948 Jefferson nickel is another reason this series is so interesting to collectors. These nickels were made primarily from a copper-nickel alloy, giving them the familiar appearance and weight associated with traditional Jefferson nickels. That composition helped create a durable coin designed for everyday circulation. But decades of handling can dramatically change the appearance of an individual specimen. Surfaces can darken. Original brightness can disappear. Tiny marks can accumulate. Environmental exposure can create spots or discoloration. And that means 2 coins from the same year can look dramatically different today. Now look closely at the details you provided for this particular 1948 example. No mint mark, gray dots, and a black dot on the reverse. Those details are important because collectors do not simply look at the date. They examine the entire personality of the coin. The date is only the beginning. They want to know what happened to the coin after it left the mint. Was it heavily circulated? Did it survive with unusual surface characteristics? Are the markings natural aging, environmental effects, or something connected to the coin's production history? Every detail can change how a collector approaches the piece. And this is where you need to slow down. Because an old nickel with unusual coloration is not automatically rare. A spot is not automatically an error. A dark surface does not automatically create a fortune. Serious collectors examine the coin as a whole. They compare the date, mint mark status, strike, surfaces, lettering, rim, reverse details, and overall condition. They also consider whether the unusual appearance is original, naturally developed, environmentally caused, or the result of later alteration. That makes your 1948 example especially interesting from a collector hunting perspective. The absence of a mint mark immediately gives us an important identifying feature. On Jefferson nickels, mint marks can help separate coins produced at different U.S. mint facilities. A Philadelphia-produced 1948 Jefferson nickel would normally carry no mint mark, so the absence itself needs to be interpreted correctly rather than automatically treated as an error. This is exactly why experienced collectors never rush to judgment. They inspect first, identify second, and value third. Now turn the coin over. The reverse side is where Monticello dominates the design. Look around the building, the lettering, the steps, the surrounding fields, and especially the surface characteristics you described. That black dot is visually noticeable, but the real question is what caused it and how it interacts with the rest of the coin. A collector looking at a potentially valuable piece wants to understand the entire surface, not just one dramatic mark. And here is another reason this coin can create excitement among collectors. Condition matters enormously. A circulated coin has already lived a life. It may have passed through thousands of transactions. It may have been carried in pockets, dropped onto counters, stored in drawers, placed inside jars, and forgotten for decades. Every tiny contact can leave a mark. That history can make circulated coins fascinating, but it also means collectors have to examine them carefully. The difference between an ordinary circulated nickel and a genuinely desirable example can come down to details that most people would never notice. For collectors, originality is also extremely important. Never assume that cleaning an old nickel will make it more valuable. Aggressive cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and may reduce collector interest. If you discover an old coin with unusual gray or dark coloration, the smartest move is to preserve it exactly as you found it and have it examined properly rather than trying to make it look newer. And now comes the moment everyone has been waiting for. According to the current value figure you provided for this specific 1948 no mint mark Monticello 5-cent coin with the described gray dots, black reverse dot, and circulated condition, the market value is $25,300. Yes, $25,300. That is a massive number for a 5-cent coin, and it shows exactly why old coins should never be dismissed simply because they look small, worn, or ordinary. A figure like this represents the kind of hidden treasure that can completely change the way you look at the coins sitting around your home. But remember the most important part of this hunt. The value applies to the specific coin and condition described, not automatically to every 1948 Jefferson nickel. The details matter. Identification matters. Authenticity matters. Condition matters. And collector demand matters. For anyone searching through an old collection, coin jar, inherited box, or forgotten group of nickels, my advice is simple. Slow down. Use good lighting. Look at both sides. Study the date. Check the mint mark area carefully. Examine unusual surfaces without touching or cleaning them unnecessarily. And if something looks genuinely unusual, preserve it and have it evaluated by a qualified coin professional. Because sometimes the biggest mistake is not failing to find a rare coin. Sometimes the biggest mistake is finding one and not realizing what you are holding. This 1948 Monticello 5-cent has taken us from an ordinary-looking old nickel to a potential $25,300 treasure, according to the value figure supplied for this example. And if you thought that was shocking, do not go anywhere. Remember, this is only coin number 1. We still have 5 more Monticello 5-cent coins to uncover, and the next discoveries are going to take this treasure hunt even deeper. So before you close this video, before you walk away from that old coin jar, and before you spend another forgotten nickel, take one more look. You might be holding history, you might be holding rarity, and you might be holding something far more valuable than it appears. This is Hidden Coin Millions, freshly updated every day. Next up, take a close look at this 1973 Monticello 5-cent with no mint mark, brown spots, and an almost fine circulated condition. At first, it may not look like the kind of coin that belongs in a serious treasure hunt. It has already been circulated. Its surface shows brown spotting. Its edges have experienced years of contact and handling. There is no dramatic silver shine screaming for attention. But that is exactly why I want you to stay focused. Because sometimes the coins people ignore are the coins that deserve a second look. And if you have old Jefferson nickels sitting inside a jar, drawer, collection, inherited box, or forgotten pile of change, do not rush past the 1973 date. Look at it. Turn it over. Study the surface. Check the details. Because when you understand what you are actually looking at, a simple 5-cent piece can suddenly become a fascinating piece of American history. The 1973 Jefferson nickel belongs to one of the longest-running and most recognizable designs in American coinage. The U.S. Mint introduced Jefferson on the 5-cent coin in 1938 with Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, appearing on the reverse. That classic Monticello reverse remained part of the Jefferson nickel design for decades. So when you hold this 1973 example, you are not simply holding a 5-cent coin. You are holding a piece of an American coinage tradition that had already been running for more than 3 decades. Think about that. By 1973, the Jefferson nickel design had already become familiar to generations of Americans. Millions of these coins moved through everyday commerce, passing through stores, cash registers, pockets, counters, and collections. Most people saw only 5 cents. Collectors see something different. They see the date. They see the mint mark area. They study the strike. They examine the surfaces. They inspect the reverse. And they ask one question. Is there something unusual here that everyone else missed? That is the question we need to ask with this coin. Now let's talk about the no mint mark. This is one of the first details that can grab the attention of someone discovering a 1973 Jefferson nickel. But there is an important distinction you need to understand. The absence of a mint mark on a 1973 Philadelphia nickel is not, by itself, proof of an error. Philadelphia traditionally used no mint mark, and the U.S. Mint explains that coins produced there are commonly identified by the absence of a mint mark. And this is exactly why experienced collectors do not jump to conclusions. They investigate, they compare, they examine, they verify. For this 1973 Jefferson nickel, the Philadelphia issue had a reported mintage of 384th on 396,000 pieces, so the date alone does not make every 1973 no mint mark nickel rare. But now we get to the detail that makes your described specimen much more visually interesting. Those brown spots. Look at them carefully. Do not immediately assume that every unusual spot is a mint error or a sign of extraordinary rarity. Surface coloration can develop for many reasons over decades, including environmental exposure and storage conditions. For a serious collector, the important thing is determining exactly what those marks represent and whether the coin retains an original, undisturbed surface. That is where patience becomes powerful. A person who sees an old nickel and immediately throws it into a pile may never notice anything. A person who takes the time to examine it under proper lighting may discover details that deserve further investigation. And that is the mindset I want you to have while searching your own coins. Do not look at an old nickel for only 5 seconds. Look at both sides. Look around the lettering. Look around Jefferson's portrait. Look at the date. Look at the mint mark position. Then turn the coin over and examine Monticello. Look at the building. Look at the steps. Look at the windows. Look at the lettering. Look at the rim. Look at the entire surface. Because a valuable discovery is rarely about one isolated feature. It is about the complete combination of characteristics. And there is another reason this coin deserves attention: condition. You describe this example as almost fine and circulated. That tells us something immediately. This coin has been through the real world. It was not simply locked away untouched from the moment it left the mint. It lived. Every scratch, contact mark, worn edge, and surface change tells part of that story. And while collectors generally prize higher-grade examples, unusual characteristics can still make circulated coins interesting. The key is understanding exactly what you have before assigning a value to it. That is why you should never clean a potentially collectible coin simply because the surface looks dark or spotted. Please remember this. If you discover an old Jefferson nickel with unusual brown coloration, do not polish it, scrub it, scrape it, or use household chemicals to make it shine. That could destroy the original surface and potentially hurt its collector appeal. Preservation is the smarter move. Keep the coin safely stored. Handle it by the edges when possible. Avoid unnecessary rubbing. And if the coin appears genuinely unusual, consider having it examined by a reputable coin dealer or professional grading service. Because once an old coin has been damaged by cleaning, you cannot simply put the original surface back. Now let's talk about the metal itself. A regular Jefferson nickel of this era was made from the familiar copper-nickel alloy. The U.S. Mint specifications identify the standard nickel composition as 75% copper and 25% nickel with a weight of about 5 grams and a diameter of approximately 21.2 millimeters. That composition gives the coin its familiar appearance and substantial feel. It also explains why an old Jefferson nickel can develop different shades and surface appearances over decades, depending on how it was handled and stored. But remember something important. The color is not the treasure by itself. The real treasure is the story behind the coin. The date, the mint, the strike, the surfaces, the condition, the authenticity, the variety, and the collector demand surrounding the specific piece. That is why today's treasure hunt is so exciting. Because we are not simply asking, is this an old nickel? We are asking, could this particular coin have something special that separates it from the millions of ordinary examples? And when you look at the 1973 date, the no mint mark status, the brown surface spots, and the almost fine circulated condition you've described, you can understand why this example has earned a place on today's list. Now imagine finding this coin unexpectedly. You open an old container. You see a handful of Jefferson nickels. You start checking the dates. And then suddenly, 1973. You turn it over. You see Monticello. You inspect the surface. You notice the unusual brown spots. And instead of throwing it back into the pile, you stop. You investigate. That moment is exactly what coin hunting is all about. The thrill is not just the money. It is the discovery. It is the possibility that something overlooked for years has finally been recognized. And now we reach the moment you've been waiting for. According to the current market value figure you supplied for this specific 1,973 Monticello 5-cent with no mint mark, brown spots, and almost fine circulated condition, the value is $18,700. Yes, $18,700. That is the number you provided for this particular described example. And that is exactly why I keep telling you, never judge an old coin by its face value alone. A 5-cent piece can carry an extraordinary story. A forgotten coin can become a serious collector discovery, and a small piece of metal can represent a surprisingly large treasure when the right combination of characteristics, authenticity, condition, and collector demand comes together. But do not misunderstand what I'm saying. Not every 1,973 Jefferson nickel is worth thousands of dollars. The published numismatic data shows that the regular Philadelphia issue had a very large mintage, and ordinary examples are not automatically rare. That is precisely why you must examine the specific coin, rather than assuming every coin of the same date has the same value. The details matter, the surfaces matter, the condition matters, and authentication matters. So here is my collector tip for today. If you find a 1,973 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark, don't immediately celebrate and don't immediately dismiss it. First, confirm the date, then inspect the mint mark area. Examine the obverse and reverse under good lighting. Study the unusual brown spots carefully. Look for genuine mint varieties or errors, rather than assuming environmental discoloration is an error. Check the rims and lettering. And most importantly, do not clean the coin. Preserve it exactly as you found it until you understand what you're holding. That simple habit can save you from destroying something potentially collectible. And remember the US. Mint confirms that mint marks identify the facility where coins were produced, while Philadelphia traditionally used no mint mark. So the absence of a mint mark on this 1,973 example is something to understand, not something to automatically label as an error. This is where smart collecting begins. Not with excitement alone, with excitement and careful examination. And that's what makes the hunt so addictive. You never know what the next coin will reveal. Today, we have already uncovered another fascinating Monticello 5-cent from the past. A coin that can look ordinary at first glance, yet becomes far more interesting when you slow down and study every detail. And this is only coin number 2. Think about that. We have already seen a 1,948 example. Now, a 1,973 example. And we still have 4 more coins waiting. 4 more dates. 4 more stories. 4 more opportunities to discover why collectors continue searching through old US coinage. So before you leave this video, I want you to remember one thing. Do not underestimate the nickel. Do not assume that a coin is worthless because it looks circulated. Do not ignore an unusual surface. Do not overlook an old date. And most importantly, do not spend your time looking only at the obvious. Sometimes the hidden details are where the real excitement begins. This is Hidden Coin Millions, and we are freshly updated every single day with more unbelievable US coin discoveries, rare dates, unusual varieties, and hidden treasures that deserve a second look. So keep your eyes open, keep your old coins safe, and stay right here. Next up, the Second World War had ended. The country was moving into the post-war era, and American coinage was quietly traveling through everyday life. And among those coins was a little 5-cent piece carrying the image of Thomas Jefferson and the famous Monticello estate. But the coin we are looking at today is not just any 1,947 Jefferson nickel. This one carries an S mint mark. It has the gray dots you described. The reverse side shows a brown spot and a black dot. And most importantly, you described this particular specimen as uncirculated. Now stop right there. That last detail changes the entire conversation, because when a coin survives decades without the heavy wear normally produced by everyday circulation, collectors begin paying much closer attention. A coin that has survived in an uncirculated state can preserve details that disappeared from millions of pieces that spent their lives moving through pockets, stores, cash registers, and everyday transactions. And that is where our story begins. The Jefferson nickel was introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and the design created by Felix Schlag placed Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. The Jefferson nickel became one of America's most recognizable circulating coins, and the design continued for decades. So when you look at this 1947 with S example, remember what you are actually holding. You are holding a coin from an era when America was rebuilding and transforming. You are holding a piece of post-war American history. And you are holding a coin that was produced at the San Francisco Mint. That tiny letter S may look insignificant to someone who is not familiar with coin collecting. But to a collector, the mint mark is one of the first things worth checking. Why? Because the mint mark helps identify where the coin was produced. And once you know where a coin came from, you can begin understanding its production history, mintage, varieties, surviving population, and collector interest. The 1947 with S. Jefferson nickel is a recognized San Francisco issue and lists the coin separately from the Philadelphia and Denver issues. The price guide also tracks the 1947 with S in both regular and full steps designations, showing how condition and strike characteristics can dramatically affect collector interest. Now look at the surface. You described gray dots on the coin. Those unusual surface characteristics immediately make the coin visually interesting. But remember something extremely important. Unusual coloration or spots should never automatically be called an error. A collector needs to determine whether the appearance comes from natural toning, storage or environmental exposure, surface alteration, or an actual mint-related characteristic. That investigation is part of the treasure hunt. And this is exactly why I want you to stop looking at old coins as simple pieces of change. Start looking at them as evidence. Every surface tells a story. Every mark can raise the question. Every detail can lead you toward a better identification. Now turn the coin over. There is Monticello. That familiar building dominates the reverse design, connecting the coin directly to Thomas Jefferson's historic Virginia estate. Look carefully at the architectural details. Look at the lettering. Look at the steps. Look around the building. And then look at the surface. You described a brown spot and a black dot on the reverse. Those features may immediately catch your eye, but the most important question is not simply, what color is that spot? The important question is, why is it there? That is the kind of question serious collectors ask. Was it natural toning? Was it environmental exposure? Was it a surface reaction? Is there evidence of a genuine mint-made characteristic? Or is it simply a mark acquired after the coin entered circulation or storage? You cannot answer those questions by looking at the coin for 2 seconds. You have to investigate. And that is why this particular example becomes so interesting, because you described it as uncirculated. An uncirculated coin can retain much sharper design detail than a circulated example. The portrait can remain stronger. The lettering can remain clearer. The reverse architecture can preserve more of its original definition. The rims can remain more intact, and the overall appearance can be dramatically different from a heavily worn coin of the same date. For collectors, that preservation can be extremely important. Records for the 1947 with S show that high-grade examples exist, including specimens reaching very advanced mint state grades. The published auction record for a MS-67 $1,947 with S. Jefferson nickel is $14,950, demonstrating that exceptional examples of this date have attracted substantial collector attention. But here is where you need to be extremely careful. A coin being described as uncirculated does not automatically mean it has been professionally certified at a particular mint state grade. Those are two different things. Professional grading services examine coins and assign grades based on their standards. Surface preservation, marks, luster, strike quality, and other characteristics can all affect the final grade. That means your description of this coin as uncirculated gives us an important starting point, but authentication and professional examination would still be necessary before anyone could confidently establish a certified grade or a market price for a specific specimen. And that brings us to another fascinating part of this coin's story. The San Francisco connection. The 1947 with S was part of the Jefferson nickel production of the period, identifies the 1947 with S separately with its own population and price information. The surviving population data shows that certified examples exist across multiple mint state grades, which demonstrates why condition remains such a major factor for collectors. So when you find a 1947 Jefferson nickel, don't just look at the date. Look for that tiny letter, that S, because the mint mark tells you that you are dealing with a San Francisco issue. And then the real examination begins. Now imagine discovering one of these inside an old collection. You pull out a handful of Jefferson nickels. Most look ordinary. Then you find a 1947. You turn it toward the light. You see the S. You notice the surface. The coin has not been worn down the way you expected. The portrait still has strong definition. The reverse still carries impressive detail. Then you notice the gray dots. You turn it over. There is a brown spot, a black dot, and suddenly you realize that this isn't a coin you should casually toss back into the pile. You need to investigate it. That moment is what makes coin hunting so addictive, because you never know when an overlooked piece of metal is going to become the most interesting object in the room. Now let's talk about the metal. The standard Jefferson nickel of this period was made from a 75% copper and 25% nickel composition with a weight of approximately 5 grams and a diameter of about 21.2 millimeters. That familiar composition gives the Jefferson nickel its recognizable appearance and physical feel. But after nearly 8 decades, surfaces can tell a completely different story. Storage conditions can affect appearance. Handling can affect surfaces. Exposure can create discoloration. And time itself leaves its fingerprints on almost every coin. That is why the gray dots and reverse brown and black spots you described should be treated as clues to investigate rather than automatic proof of rarity. The real excitement comes from the complete combination of characteristics. 1947 date. Mint mark. Uncirculated condition as described. Distinctive surface appearance. Monticello reverse. And the potential collector interest associated with a well-preserved example. That combination is what makes this coin worthy of our attention. And now, I want to talk directly to everyone watching from the United States. If you have an old coin collection sitting untouched somewhere in your home, do not assume the coins inside are worthless just because nobody has looked at them in years. Go slowly. Take one coin at a time. Use good lighting. Study both sides. Check the dates. Check the mint marks. Look closely at the surfaces. And if you find something that appears unusual, don't immediately clean it. That is one of the biggest mistakes a new collector can make. A coin's original surface can be extremely important. So if you discover a potentially collectible Jefferson nickel, preserve it, protect it, and have it properly examined if the characteristics appear unusual. You are not trying to make the coin look new. You are trying to protect what has survived for nearly 80 years. And that is the difference between simply owning old coins and actually understanding them. Now we are getting closer to the moment everyone has been waiting for. We have talked about the history. We have talked about the Jefferson design. We have talked about Monticello. We have talked about the San Francisco mint mark. We have talked about the uncirculated condition you described. We have examined the gray dots. We have examined the brown and black marks on the reverse. And now there is only one question left. What is the value? According to the current market value figure you supplied for this specific 1,947 with S Monticello 5 cent, with the characteristics and uncirculated condition you described, the value is $27,400. Yes, $27,400. That is the figure you provided for this particular example. And when you hear a number like that attached to a 5-cent coin, suddenly that tiny piece of metal doesn't look so ordinary anymore. It starts looking like a hidden treasure, a piece of American history, a collector's discovery, something that deserves to be protected rather than casually spent. But remember, the figure applies to the specific coin description you supplied. It should not be interpreted as saying, every 1,947 with S Jefferson nickel is worth $27. 100th published data shows a wide range of values depending on grade and designation, and exceptional certified examples can command dramatically different prices. That is why identification and professional evaluation matter. And if you are lucky enough to discover a 1,947 with S that genuinely appears uncirculated, preserve it. Do not polish it. Do not rub it aggressively. Do not use chemicals. Do not attempt a homemade cleaning method. Instead, protect the coin and seek professional guidance. Because once the original surface is damaged, you cannot simply undo it. And here is my biggest collector tip for this coin. Never stop at the date. A 1,947 nickel is the beginning of the investigation. The S takes you one step further. The condition takes you another step. The surfaces give you more clues. The reverse gives you more information. And professional authentication can ultimately tell you what you really have. That is how hidden treasure is discovered. Not by guessing, not by rushing, but by paying attention. And that is exactly why I wanted this 1,947 with S example on today's list. Because it reminds us that a tiny detail can completely change the way you see an old coin. The next time you find an old Jefferson nickel, don't just glance at it and move on. Turn it over. Look closer. Check the date. Check the mint mark. Study the surfaces. You could be looking at a piece of American history that has survived for generations. And if the right characteristics come together, the collector interest can become extremely serious. This is Hidden Coin Millions, freshly updated every single day with more rare US coin discoveries, hidden treasures, unusual dates, and incredible stories from America's coinage history. Next up, because when most people hear the year 2000, they probably don't imagine an ancient treasure. It doesn't sound old enough. It doesn't immediately feel like a coin from another era. But that is exactly what makes today's discovery so interesting. This is a 2000 Monticello 5 cent with a P mint mark, featuring the black layer and black dots on the reverse side that you described and an almost fine circulated condition. And I want you to look at this coin very differently. Do not simply look at the date and move on. Do not see 2000 and assume the coin is too modern to matter. Do not see a circulated surface and automatically throw it back into the pile. Because coin collecting is all about details. Sometimes the date gets your attention. Sometimes the mint mark does. Sometimes the condition changes the entire story. And sometimes it is an unusual surface characteristic that makes you stop and ask a much bigger question. What exactly happened to this coin? That is the question we are asking today. The 2000 with P. Jefferson nickel comes from a fascinating chapter in American coinage. The classic Jefferson and Monticello design had already been appearing on U.S. 5-cent coins for more than 60 years by the time this coin was produced. The U.S. Mint identifies Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse, with the design continuing through 2003 before the major westward journey redesigns began. So even though 2000 may feel recent, this coin belongs to the final years of the original Jefferson-Monticello design era. And that makes it part of an important transition in American coin history. Think about that. This little nickel was produced at the beginning of a new millennium. America was entering the year 2000. Technology was changing rapidly. The country was stepping into a completely new century. And millions of Jefferson nickels were quietly entering circulation. Most people never thought twice about them. They simply spent them. But collectors know that every coin has a story. And today we are looking at one particular 2000 with P example with the unusual characteristics you described. Now let's start with the P mint mark. That tiny letter is extremely important for identification. The P indicates that this nickel was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. Lists the 2000 with P. Jefferson nickel as a Philadelphia issue with a reported mintage of 8 for 46 pounds, 240,000 coins. That is a huge number. And this is where the real investigation begins. Because a large mintage means the date and mint mark alone do not make every 2000 with P nickel rare. So if you find a 2000 with P in your pocket, you should not immediately assume you have discovered a fortune. Instead, you should ask, what is different about this particular coin? And that brings us to the most visually dramatic feature you described, the black layer on the reverse. Now turn that coin over in your imagination. There is Monticello, the historic Jefferson residence, the architecture, the lettering, the rim, and across the reverse, you notice a dark, almost black appearance. Then you see the individual black dots. Suddenly, this ordinary-looking nickel becomes much more interesting. But here is where smart collectors separate themselves from careless guesses. A black layer or black spots on a coin do not automatically prove a mint error. Those surface characteristics could have a number of possible causes, including environmental exposure, storage conditions, chemical reactions, or other forms of surface alteration. To determine whether something is genuinely mint-made, a specialist would need to examine the coin carefully. And that is exactly why you should never clean a coin simply because you think the dark surface looks unattractive. Do not polish it. Do not scrub it. Do not use chemicals. Do not try to remove the black layer. If the coin turns out to have an unusual collectible characteristic, you want the original surface preserved for examination. Because once you alter that surface, you may destroy the evidence that could have helped explain the coin. That is why preservation is one of the most important habits a collector can develop. Now let's talk about the composition. The regular Jefferson nickel is made from 75% copper and 25% nickel, weighs approximately 5 grams, and measures about 21.21 millimeters in diameter. That copper-nickel composition gives the coin its familiar silver-colored appearance. But decades of circulation and exposure can dramatically change how an individual coin looks. A coin can become darker. It can develop spots. It can lose its original luster. Its surfaces can become dull, and in some cases, environmental exposure can create dramatic discoloration. That means the black layer and black dots you described are not something to ignore, but they are also not something we should automatically label as a rare mint error without examination. The real treasure hunt is figuring out why they are there. And that question is what makes this coin so exciting. Now let's talk about the condition you gave us. You described this 2000 with P example as fine condition. That means we are looking at a circulated coin. It has lived a life. It has moved through commerce. It has experienced handling, and its surfaces show evidence of that journey. For many collectors, high-grade examples are especially desirable because they preserve more of the original detail and surface quality. Notes that the regular 2000 with P Jefferson nickel is common in most grades, but that the coin becomes considerably more challenging to locate in very high grades, particularly around MS67. That is a fascinating distinction. It tells us that the date itself is not the entire story. The grade can completely change the conversation. The strike can matter. The surfaces can matter. The presence of full steps on Monticello can matter. And unusual characteristics can make a particular specimen worth further investigation. This is why collectors examine coins so carefully. Two coins can have exactly the same date, exactly the same mint mark, exactly the same denomination, and yet their desirability can be completely different because their conditions and characteristics are different. Now think about the reverse of this coin again. Monticello is not just an architectural image. It has been one of the defining symbols of the Jefferson Nickel series since its introduction. When you see that building, you immediately know what series you're looking at. And the 2000 with P belongs to the final stretch of that original design before the major redesigns that began in 2004. So this coin represents a fascinating moment. It carries an old design into a new millennium. It connects modern America to a Jefferson nickel design that had already survived generations. And now, nearly a quarter of a century later, you can still find these coins in collections and circulation. That is the beauty of American coinage. History doesn't always sit behind glass. Sometimes it is sitting in a drawer. Sometimes it is inside an old jar. Sometimes it is buried beneath a pile of ordinary change. And sometimes someone notices a strange-looking coin and decides not to spend it. That is the moment the treasure hunt begins. Now imagine finding this 2000 with P yourself. You pick up a group of Jefferson nickels. You scan the dates. You notice the 2000. You flip it over. You see the P mint mark. At first, nothing seems extraordinary. Then you notice the reverse. There is a dark layer. Then another dark spot. Then another. You hold the coin under better lighting. The surface looks completely different. Suddenly, you are no longer casually sorting change. You are investigating. You start wondering whether the appearance is natural. You wonder whether the coin was exposed to something. You wonder whether it has a recognized variety. You wonder whether the surface is original. And most importantly, you realize this coin deserves a closer look. That is the mentality I want every viewer of Hidden Coin Millions to develop. Do not rush. Do not assume. Investigate. Because the goal is not to call every unusual coin rare. The goal is to find the genuinely interesting ones. And now, we are getting closer to the number everyone has been waiting for. We have discussed the 2000 date. We have identified the Philadelphia mint mark. We have looked at the Monticello reverse. We have discussed the copper-nickel composition. We have examined the unusual black layer. We have talked about the black dots. We have considered the fine circulated condition. And now, it is time for the value. According to the current market value figure you supplied for this specific 2000, with P. Monticello, 5 cent with the black layer, black dots on the reverse, and fine condition you described, the value is $9,500. Yes, $9,500. For a 5-cent coin, that is exactly the kind of number that makes you look at an ordinary nickel completely differently. A tiny coin, a familiar design, a small denomination. Yet according to the figure supplied for this specific example, a value reaching $9,500. That is why I call these coins hidden treasures. But remember, the $9,500 figure is being presented specifically for the coin and condition you described. It should not be interpreted as saying that every 2,000 with P. Jefferson nickel is worth thousands of dollars. Identifies the regular 2,000 with P as a very common issue overall, with rarity and value changing substantially based on grade and special characteristics. And that distinction is extremely important, because smart collectors don't just chase big numbers, they chase evidence. They chase unusual varieties. They chase exceptional condition. They chase authentic errors. They chase coins with characteristics that can be verified. That is how a real collection is built. So here is your collector tip for coin number 4. If you discover a 2,000 with P. Jefferson nickel with an unusual black layer or dark spots, do not clean it. Keep it exactly as you found it. Take clear photographs of both sides. Examine the coin under strong, neutral lighting. Check the date. Check the P mint mark. Study the reverse. Look at the rims and lettering. Compare the coin with the normal 2,000 with P. Jefferson nickel. And if the characteristics appear genuinely unusual, have the coin examined by a qualified numismatist or professional grading service. Do not let excitement make you destroy the evidence. Protect the coin first. Investigate second. Value it third. That is the smarter way to hunt for hidden treasure. And remember something else. The U.S. Mint's own records show that the 2000 uncirculated coin set included Jefferson nickels bearing the Philadelphia P and Denver D mint marks, making the 2000 issue part of an important moment in U.S. mint collecting at the beginning of the new millennium. So this isn't just a random year. It is a coin from a fascinating transition period. An old Jefferson design entering a new century. A familiar Monticello reverse appearing on a coin produced at Philadelphia. A tiny 5-cent piece that millions of Americans probably never looked at twice. And now, one unusual example has become part of our hidden coin millions treasure hunt. That is what makes this hobby so exciting. You don't need a giant treasure chest to begin. Sometimes, you just need to look closer at what is already around you. Because the coin everyone else ignores may be the coin that makes you stop. The coin that makes you investigate. The coin that makes you ask questions. And the coin that reminds you that value can sometimes hide behind the smallest details. This is Hidden Coin Millions, freshly updated every single day with more rare US coins, incredible discoveries, collector secrets, and hidden treasures. And we are not finished yet. Coin number 1 shocked us. Coin number 2 pushed the hunt even further. Coin number 3 took us into an older generation of Jefferson nickels. And now coin number 4 has brought us into the year 2000 with a Philadelphia mint mark and the unusual reverse characteristics you described. But there are still 2 coins left. 2 more discoveries. 2 more stories. And 2 more chances for a coin that looks ordinary to become the star of the entire treasure hunt. So keep your old nickels. Check those forgotten collections. Open that old coin jar. Look through those inherited coins. And whatever you do, don't judge a Jefferson nickel before you have checked every detail. Because coin number 5 is coming next. And after what we have already uncovered, you should know by now. Next up, we have traveled through different decades, we have examined different mint marks. We have looked at unusual surfaces. We have uncovered Jefferson nickels that most people would probably overlook without giving them a second glance. But this next coin has something that makes it especially exciting for today's hunt. We are going back to 1980, and the coin in front of us is a 1980 Monticello 5-cent with a P mint mark, grey dots on the surface, brown dots on the reverse, and the fine circulated condition you described. Now look at that date again, 1980. For many people, that number does not immediately sound like a rare coin date. And that is precisely where the opportunity to discover something interesting begins. Because serious coin hunting is not about staring at a coin and asking whether it looks old enough. It is about examining what is actually there. The date, the mint mark, the condition, the surfaces, the strike, the reverse, the unusual characteristics, and the overall story of the coin. This 1980 with P. Jefferson nickel belongs to a design that Americans had already been seeing for more than 4 decades. The Jefferson nickel was introduced in 1938, featuring Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. That original design remained an important part of U.S. coinage for generations. So when you look at this 1980 coin, you are looking at more than a 5-cent denomination. You are looking at a piece of American history from the final decades of the original Jefferson Monticello design. And think about what was happening in America around 1980. The country was entering a new decade. Technology was beginning to transform everyday life. American culture was changing, and millions of Jefferson nickels were moving through the economy. Cash registers, stores, banks, pocket change, coin jars, and collections. Most of those coins were never treated as anything special. They were simply money. But almost 50 years later, some of those coins are being examined with completely different eyes. Collectors are asking questions that ordinary people never asked. What condition did this coin survive in? What mint produced it? Does it have a recognized variety? Are the unusual surfaces original? Are the marks environmental? Are there genuine mint-made characteristics? And does the specific specimen deserve further professional examination? That is where this coin becomes interesting. Now let's focus on the P mint mark. That tiny letter tells us that this nickel was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. The mint mark may be tiny, but it is one of the first things a collector should inspect when identifying a Jefferson nickel. Never ignore it. Never assume that 2 coins with the same date are automatically identical. The mint mark can separate issues from different production facilities and help collectors determine exactly which coin they are examining. And with this specimen, we have a 1980 with P. That gives us an important starting point. But it is only the beginning. Now look at the surface. You described grey dots on the coin. That immediately gives this specimen a distinctive appearance. But I want to make something very clear for anyone watching this video and checking coins at home. Grey dots or unusual coloration are not automatically proof of a mint error. A coin can develop unusual surface coloration from environmental exposure, storage conditions, chemical reactions, or other factors after it leaves the mint. So the correct collector approach is not to immediately declare the coin rare. The correct approach is to investigate. That is what makes this treasure hunt so exciting. You see something unusual. You stop. You examine it. You ask why it is there. And then you determine whether the characteristic is actually important from a numismatic perspective. Now turn the coin over. And this is where your description becomes even more interesting. The reverse side has brown dots. Monticello is sitting right there in the center of the design. The building, the lettering, the steps, the surrounding surface. And then those brown dots catch your eye. You look again. You move the coin under the light. You examine the entire reverse, and suddenly the coin doesn't look quite as ordinary anymore. But again, don't rush. The color alone doesn't tell us everything. The location of the spots matters. Their appearance matters. The surface underneath them matters. The overall condition matters. And determining whether the marks originated at the mint or developed later requires careful examination. That is why professional numismatists look at coins under controlled conditions. They don't make conclusions simply because a coin has a strange color. They investigate the evidence. And that is exactly what you should do. Now let's talk about the condition. You describe this specimen as fine condition. That means this is a circulated example. This coin has experienced real life. It has been handled. It has traveled. It has encountered other coins. It has probably spent time in pockets, containers, cash drawers, or other everyday environments. That history is part of what makes circulated coins so fascinating. Every coin has a journey. You don't know where this one traveled. You don't know how many hands touched it. You don't know how many transactions it passed through. You don't know how long it sat forgotten. But somehow, it survived. And now, it is being examined again. That is the magic of old coin collecting. A coin can disappear from someone's attention for decades and suddenly become interesting to a new generation. Now let's talk about the metal. The standard Jefferson nickel uses the familiar 75% copper and 25% nickel composition with a weight of about 5 grams and a diameter of roughly 21.2 millimeters. That composition is one reason the Jefferson nickel has such a recognizable appearance. But after years of circulation and storage, the surface can change. It can become darker. It can become duller. It can develop spots. It can lose its original brightness. And environmental exposure can create dramatic differences between coins of exactly the same date and mint. So when you see the gray dots on the obverse and brown dots on the reverse of this, described 1980 with P example, treat them as clues. Don't immediately call them an error. Don't clean them. Don't scrape them. Don't polish them. Preserve them, because the surface itself may be part of the evidence. This is one of the most important lessons for anyone who wants to search for valuable coins. Never destroy the evidence before you understand it. A cleaning attempt can permanently alter a coin. A chemical can change the surface. A polishing cloth can leave microscopic scratches. And once those changes happen, you cannot simply reverse them. So if you discover an old Jefferson nickel with unusual characteristics, the smartest move is preservation first. Investigation second. Professional evaluation when appropriate. Now imagine this happening to you. You are sorting through an old collection. Maybe it came from a family member. Maybe it has been sitting in a box. Maybe you bought a group of old coins without knowing exactly what was inside. You start checking them, one by one. You see Jefferson nickel after Jefferson nickel. Then you reach 1980. You notice the P. You flip it over. You notice the brown dots. You look again. You realize the obverse has gray dots too. Now you stop. Instead of putting it back into the pile, you put it aside. You want to know more. And that one decision could be the difference between overlooking an unusual specimen and giving it the attention it deserves. That is what I mean when I tell you, check your old coins carefully. Not because every old coin is automatically valuable, but because you cannot know what you have until you actually examine it. Now let's talk about collector demand. Collectors are constantly searching for coins with combinations of characteristics that make them interesting. Some chase rare dates. Some chase mint errors. Some specialize in Jefferson nickels. Some search for exceptional grades. Others love unusual toning and original surfaces. And some collectors simply love the history. The beauty of the Jefferson nickel is that it offers all of these avenues. There is the history of Thomas Jefferson. There is the iconic Monticello reverse. There are different mint facilities. There are varieties. There are strike differences. There are condition differences. And there are unusual individual coins that deserve closer examination. That makes the series a fascinating hunting ground. And now we are reaching the moment you've been waiting for. We have discussed the 1980 date. We have identified the P mint mark. We have examined the grey dots. We have looked at the brown dots on the reverse. We have discussed the Monticello design. We have talked about the copper-nickel composition. We have examined the fine circulated condition. And now there is only one question remaining. How much is this specific coin worth? According to the current market value figure you supplied for this specific 1980p Monticello, 5 cent with the grey dots, brown reverse dots and fine condition you described, the value is $35,700. Yes, $35,700. That is the figure you provided for this particular specimen. And suddenly, that little 5-cent coin doesn't feel little anymore. It feels like a hidden treasure, a forgotten piece of American coinage. A coin that deserves attention. A coin that should not be casually thrown back into a pile without being investigated. But remember, that figure applies to the specific coin description you supplied. It does not mean that every 1980p Jefferson nickel is worth $35, hundredth, the date, mint mark, condition, variety, authenticity, and exact surface characteristics all matter when establishing a coin's actual market value. That distinction is critical, because real collectors don't simply look at a date and guess. They examine, they compare, they verify, and they protect. So if you find a 1980 with P. Jefferson nickel with unusual grey or brown spotting, my collector tip is simple. Do not clean it. Keep it exactly as you found it. Hold it by the edges. Use good lighting. Photograph both sides. Inspect the date. Confirm the P mint mark. Study the reverse. Look closely at the rim. Look at the lettering. Look at Monticello. Compare it with a normal example. And if something appears genuinely unusual, take it to someone experienced in US Numismatics for an examination. Because the difference between an ordinary coin and a truly collectible specimen is often found in details that the average person never notices. And that is why this treasure hunt matters. The goal isn't simply to look for old coins. The goal is to learn how to look at old coins differently. A coin that looks ordinary from 3 feet away can become fascinating when you examine it under proper light. A tiny mint mark can tell you where it came from. A surface characteristic can make you ask questions. A condition difference can change collector interest. And a professional examination can reveal information that the naked eye cannot confidently establish. That is the world of coin collecting. And once you start seeing coins this way, you will never look at your pocket change exactly the same again. This 1980 with P example has taken us one step closer to the end of today's treasure hunt. And what a journey it has been. We started with one old Monticello 5 cent, then another. Now we have reached coin number 5 with a P mint mark, grey dots, brown reverse dots, and the fine condition you described. And according to the value figure supplied for this particular example, we're talking about $35,700. That is an enormous figure attached to a tiny piece of American coinage. And if you are sitting there thinking, how could a 5-cent coin possibly become this interesting? That is exactly why you should keep watching. Because there is still one coin left. Coin number 6. The final discovery. The final chapter. The coin that will complete today's Hidden Coin Millions treasure hunt. And after everything we have uncovered so far, I want you to ask yourself one question. What if the final coin is even more surprising. Don't leave now. Don't skip ahead, because the final Monticello 5 cent is waiting. And when we reveal it, you will understand why checking the smallest details can make all the difference. This is Hidden Coin Millions, freshly updated every single day with more US coin discoveries, rare dates, unusual varieties, collector stories, and hidden treasures. So keep those old coins safe. Keep searching. Keep checking. And most importantly, next up, the final coin in today's Hidden Coin Millions treasure hunt. We have traveled through decades of American coinage. We started with older Jefferson nickels, moved through different generations, followed different mint marks, examined unusual surfaces, and watched the story become more exciting with every single coin. But now, we arrive at 2003. And there is something incredibly important about that year, because 2003 represents the closing chapter of the original Jefferson Monticello reverse design. The United States Mint explains that Jefferson's portrait and Monticello reverse, both designed by Felix Schlag, continued from 1938 through 2003. Beginning in 2004, the nickel entered the famous Westward Journey redesign era. So when you look at this 2003 Monticello 5 cent, you are looking at one of the final coins of an era. And this particular example has the details you gave us: a P mint mark, black spots on the reverse side, and an almost fine circulated condition. Now stop for a second, because this is where many people make the biggest mistake. They see the year 2003. They see a Jefferson nickel. They see circulation wear. And they think, that's just an ordinary nickel. But a serious collector doesn't stop there. A serious collector turns the coin over, looks at the mint mark, studies the surface, examines Monticello, checks the date, looks for varieties, looks for unusual characteristics, and asks, what exactly am I looking at? That is the question behind this final coin. The 2003 with P. Jefferson nickel was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. PCGS records a reported mintage of 401,840,000 pieces with a standard composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel, a weight of 5 grams, and a diameter of 21.20 millimeters. That mintage is important because it tells us something very clearly. The 2003 with P date and P mint mark by themselves do not make every example rare. So where does the excitement come from? It comes from the specific characteristics of the individual coin. And that is why your description matters. You have described that the 2003 with P with black spots on the reverse. Now look closely. There is Monticello, the historic building that had appeared on Jefferson nickels for generations. The lettering surrounds the design. The rim frames the coin. And then your eye catches those dark spots. One, then another. And suddenly, the reverse doesn't look like the ordinary nickel sitting in your pocket. But here is where we need to slow down. Black spots on a coin are not automatically a mint error. They can result from environmental exposure, storage conditions, surface reactions, or other post-mint effects. Determining whether a particular unusual mark was created at the mint requires careful examination. That is why the correct collector approach is not to see a black spot and immediately shout, error. The correct approach is investigate it, study it, photograph it, compare it, preserve it, and if necessary, have it professionally examined. Because the truth is always more valuable than a guess. And that is especially important with a coin like this. Why? Because 2003 was not just another year for the Jefferson nickel. It was the final year of the original Monticello reverse design before the major redesigns of 2004 and 2005, the US. Mint announced that the 2003 Jefferson nickel would be followed by new reverse designs honoring the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark expedition. Think about what that means. For more than 6 decades, Americans had seen Jefferson on one side and Monticello on the other. Generation after generation, decade after decade. Then came 2003, the final year, the end of an era, and millions of these final traditional design nickels entered American commerce. Some were placed into collections. Some went into coin jars. Some were spent immediately. Some disappeared into drawers. Some were forgotten. And some survived with unusual characteristics that collectors may want to examine today. That is what makes the final coin in our list so fitting. It isn't simply another date. It represents a transition, a closing chapter, a final appearance of a design that had become one of the most recognizable images in American coinage. And your example has another feature that immediately demands attention. Those black spots on the reverse. Now let's talk about the condition. You describe this coin as almost fine. That means it is a circulated example. It has been handled. It has experienced contact. It has moved through the real world. And that gives this coin a history that a freshly preserved, mint-state example simply doesn't have. Imagine where it might have traveled. A store, a cash register, a pocket, a drawer, a coin jar, a bank, another pocket, another transaction. Nobody knew where it would eventually end up, but somehow it survived long enough to become part of this treasure hunt. And that is one of the most beautiful things about collecting American coins. A coin doesn't have to sit in a museum to carry history. Sometimes history is sitting quietly in an old container in your home. Sometimes it is mixed into a pile of ordinary change. And sometimes it takes one person paying attention to finally bring that history back into the spotlight. Now let's examine the P mint mark. That letter identifies the Philadelphia issue, and on a 2003 with P. Jefferson nickel, the mint mark is an important part of identifying exactly which coin you have. But again, do not confuse identification with rarity. The P tells you where the coin was made. It does not automatically tell you that the coin is valuable. The real investigation is what comes next. What is the condition? What varieties are present? What does the strike look like? What are the surfaces like? Are there legitimate mint-made characteristics? Are the dark spots natural or environmental? Is there evidence of alteration? Could there be a recognized variety? Those are the questions that turn a casual coin search into serious collecting. And there is another fascinating detail about the 2003 with P. Separately catalogues the regular 2003 with P. Jefferson nickel and the full steps variety. Its records show that exceptional high-grade full steps examples can command substantially more collector attention than ordinary circulated pieces. That tells us something extremely important. Condition and strike quality can completely change the collector conversation. 2 coins can share the same year. 2 coins can share the same mint mark. 2 coins can have the same basic design, yet their desirability can be dramatically different. That is why you should never judge a Jefferson nickel only by its date. Look deeper. Now think about the reverse again. Monticello, a design that had been part of the Jefferson nickel since 1938. A building that millions of Americans saw every time they turned over a nickel. And now, on this 2003 coin, it represents the end of the original design era. The next year, the reverse would change. That makes the 2003 nickel historically fascinating, even before we begin discussing the unusual characteristics you described. It is a final generation Jefferson Monticello nickel, and that alone gives it a story worth remembering. Now imagine finding this coin yourself. You're going through a group of old nickels. You find one from 2003. You notice the P. You turn it over. Monticello appears. At first, it looks normal. Then you notice something. A dark spot. You move the coin under the light. Another black spot. You look closer. Suddenly, you are no longer looking at 5 cents. You are looking at a mystery. What caused those marks? When did they appear? Are they environmental? Are they surface-related? Is there anything else unusual about the coin? And that is the moment when the treasure hunt begins. A final generation Monticello Jefferson nickel. And according to the value figure supplied for this particular described example, $7,400. That is exactly why I want you to stop underestimating old coins. But remember, this $7,400 figure is specifically the value you supplied for the described specimen. It should not be treated as the market value of every 2003 with P. Jefferson nickel. Published data shows that ordinary 2003 with P examples are a widely produced issue, while premium values can depend heavily on grade, strike, variety, authentication, and other characteristics. And that is one of the most important lessons from today's entire video. The date is the beginning, not the ending. The mint mark is another clue. The condition is another clue. The surfaces are another clue. The reverse is another clue. The variety is another clue. And authentication brings everything together. That is how you search for hidden treasure intelligently. So if you find a 2003 with P. Jefferson nickel, don't just throw it into your change pile. Look at it. Check the date. Check the P. Turn it over. Study Monticello. Look carefully at the surfaces. If you see black spots or unusual coloration, preserve the coin rather than cleaning it. Then compare it with a normal example and, if necessary, seek professional examination. Because you never want to destroy something before you understand it. And now let's step back and look at the bigger picture. We started today's treasure hunt with 6 Monticello 5-cent coins. 6 different stories. 6 different dates. Different mint marks, different surface characteristics, different conditions, and different collector considerations. But every single coin taught us the same lesson. Look closer. The first glance is not enough. The date is not enough. The color is not enough. The mint mark is not enough. You have to examine the entire coin. That is how collectors find the details that everyone else misses. And there is something especially satisfying about ending this list with the 2003 with P, because this coin represents the final chapter of the original Jefferson Monticello reverse design. The U.S. Mint confirms that the original design continued through 2003 with new reverse designs beginning in 2004. So when you hold a 2003 Jefferson nickel, you're holding a little piece of the end of a 6-decade American coinage tradition. And if your particular example also has unusual surface characteristics, that gives you another reason to stop and investigate. That is the magic of collecting. A tiny coin can connect you to history. A mint mark can tell you where it was made. A design can tell you what era it belongs to. A surface can raise a mystery. And a careful collector can turn that mystery into knowledge. So before you leave this video, go back to your own collection. Look through those Jefferson nickels. Check those dates. Check those mint marks. Turn them over. Study the reverse. Don't overlook the coins simply because they are common denominations. And never clean a potentially collectible coin before understanding what you have. Because sometimes the coin that looks the least impressive at first glance is the one that makes you stop and say, "Wait, what is this?" That is the moment every collector lives for. And that is exactly what Hidden Coin Millions is all about. We are freshly updated every single day with more US coin discoveries, hidden treasures, unusual varieties, collector secrets, and incredible pieces of American coinage history. Today's 6-coin journey is now complete, but the search is not over. There are millions of old US coins still sitting in collections, jars, drawers, boxes, estates, and forgotten corners across America. And somewhere out there, another overlooked coin is waiting for someone to notice it. So keep searching, keep learning, keep checking, keep your old coins protected. And never assume that a 5-cent coin is just 5 cents until you have looked at every detail. This is Hidden Coin Millions, freshly updated every day. And today's final treasure was the 2003 with P. Monticello 5-cent, with the black spots on the reverse and almost fine condition you described. The final chapter is complete, but the hunt for hidden coin millions never ends. Source check, the US. Mint confirms that the original Jefferson Monticello design continued through 2003, while lists the 2003 with P at a reported mintage of 401,840,000 and identifies both regular strike and full steps varieties.